As the world is getting noisier, it's more important than ever to be able to discern the signal from the noise. The noise isn't just the digital and informational overload that's happening, it's existential. It's physical, emotional, mental, relational, geopolitical, energetic, and spiritual. And it's deeply destabilizing. You're looking around and you're seeing unrest in the streets. There's war building in the not so distant distance. Digital control systems are tightening quietly in the background like a snake slowly wrapping its prey. People are fighting. Truth is more and more bent. Systems are collapsing externally. And our internal belief structures are collapsing too, because these have been the inner scaffolding that once held up the architecture of the systems and institutions of our world. And that's deeply destabilizing. And underneath it all, you can probably feel it too. There's a growing panic rising in the collective field. People are overwhelmed, though they often don't know why. People sense that something changed in 2020, and it hasn't stopped since. I wrote about that in my book, Becoming Whole. And even if you can't quite articulate it, you might notice that the ground beneath you doesn't feel quite as it used to. Sometimes you might not be able to find solid ground because reality is shifting so fast. 2020 is going to be another year that by the time it ends, the world isn't going to be the same. Things are getting louder. And in all the noise and distortion, it's getting more challenging to know what's real. That's the symptom of living in a field of distorted signals, messages that provoke fires and stoke the flames. But where do you find the balm for your soul? Yet, even now, the signal still exists. You won't find it in the volume, you won't find it in the headlines, you won't find it in the inflammatory content. You'll find it in the places that make you exhale. Signal isn't necessarily what feels good. It's what feels true and real, not emotionally intense or even validating, just quietly unmistakable realness. It just lands and something inside you settles like, ah. And in this noisy world, what exhausts us isn't just the volume, though it is loud, but it's that most of what we hear isn't truly aligned. And when it does align, it lands like a tuning fork inside your chest. It doesn't make noise, it makes space. In our collapsing world, the signal is the sound of coherence remembering itself. You don't need more answers to find the signal, even though your survival brain will tell you that you need more information to feel safe. And information can be helpful, but it can also be distorted and manipulated, and too much of anything can be overwhelming. So, to find the signal, you just need to stay close to what brings you back to your breath. That's the signal. It's not out there, it's already within you, beneath the noise. And when you find it, you'll stop reaching because you'll start remembering. What is the signal? True signal is something that you hear, you feel, you encounter, and it doesn't just sound right. It brings you back to yourself. It quiets the noise, it clears the static, it makes you remember who you are beneath the stress, the performance, the ideas, the pressure. It's not loud. It's not trying to convince you or grab your attention. It just lands deeply. And something inside you goes, yes, that's it. Not because it matches your opinion or your beliefs, but because it restores your clarity. A message can resonate without being a signal, because it mimics your story or it matches your pain. It's what you want to hear, but true signal realigns your field instead of just reflecting your narrative. Resonance says, I like this, I relate. Signal says, this harmonizes me, I remember. So the true signal doesn't necessarily make you feel good, it makes you feel true. Sometimes it lands gently and sometimes it lands like a shock wave, but always with the recognition I knew this before I knew it. So I want to share this lesson in signal versus the noise. I'd been having pain and stiffness in my sacrum for the last 9 months. That's that triangle bone at the bottom of your spine. And I'd cleared many, many layers of emotional stuff there last year. But there was a structural issue left after 47 years of incorrect posture and tension holding it out of alignment. That was all I knew. And all of a sudden it broke free, but it wasn't fixed. I've been going to a chiropractor for several months who does deep tissue work and then adjusts the spine. And I had a bit of improvement, but then I plateaued and I haven't got better even though I went every 2 weeks. So when the new year came, I decided it was time to try something else, but I didn't have a plan yet. Then in a random cigar conversation, someone reminded me about craniosacral work. It's wild how miracles happen as soon as we shift into the faith and stop filling the space with static. When we grow up through childhood trauma, we develop a hyper self-reliance. That's what happens when you can't count on someone else and you learn that you have to do it all on your own. That's when we try to control things through hyper self-reliance. Then we end up filling the space within and around us with static, and that distorts what comes in and what goes out. And then we expend a lot of energy trying to figure things out, throwing spaghetti at the wall, not realizing that we're spinning our wheels and getting in our own way. We fill the space with noise, and that's why we can't hear the signal. The miracle shows up when we get out of the way. And it doesn't mean we don't take action, but it means we hear the signal and then take aligned action. So the message arrived through my cigar friend. And it had been years since I had subtle body work like craniosacral, where the practitioner applies very, very gentle pressure, intuitively listens to the body, and the body heals itself. And as soon as she started working on me, it was like my body could hear the signal again because the work is so subtle and clear. Whereas the deep tissue work was aggressive and loud, it made my body jump and tense up, bracing for the loudness, on top of the tension that I'd been carrying my whole life. Many years ago, when I was studying at the Acupressure Institute in Berkeley, we learned all kinds of subtle body work. And one of my instructors taught us when you meet tension with tension, what you get is more tension. And I knew that the whole time I was struggling with the sacral thing. But it's wild how we can lose the signal when things get loud. The deep tissue work wasn't wrong, and the chiropractor didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes that works for people, especially when they're so disconnected from their body. But in my case, I overrode my system's natural intelligence by going to the deep tissue. It added more tension to the tension, more noise to the static. This is the mirror. Louder interventions, whether information, medicine, activism, creating content, healing, communication, performance, all of that can feel really powerful, but it can drown out the signal that already knows how to restore equilibrium. Your body can't hear the signal when it's bracing for the noise. So, what my body revealed was that the deep tissue work is like an intervention from the outside in. And that can be effective when systems are asleep, but it's more disruptive when the system is simply aware, yet it doesn't know what to do. Whereas craniosacral work is like resonance from the inside out. It doesn't force change, it invites remembrance. It listens to the pulse behind the pattern. It mirrors instead of forcing or fixing. My sacrum didn't need more pressure. It needed the space and permission to recalibrate in its own language. The pain wasn't resistance, it was a signal buffered by the noise. But once the noise stopped, the signal reappeared and the field could reorganize to that tuning fork. This is a template for signal restoration. The loudness doesn't mean something is better or truer, and the subtlety doesn't mean it's weaker or less important or less effective. It often means it's so true that your nervous system finally relaxes enough to receive it. The soul speaks through the body, but it's subtle. And when the field is noisy, it's hard to hear. What are you noticing in your body recently? If you slow down enough, if you turn down the volume enough to be present and listen. Sometimes the pain is resistance, but other times it's a signal buffered by the noise. The pain in my sacrum wasn't the enemy, though sometimes it felt like that when it woke me up in the middle of the night. It was a message, but one that I couldn't get through clearly enough because the surrounding field was too loud. So the pain had to amplify itself just to be heard. And that's why deeper pressure didn't help it. It just made my body brace more, contract more, complain more. And the same happens in the world. But with my body, once the noise stopped, the signal reemerged and the field could relax and reorganize naturally. Then the signal, the real message underneath the pain, can finally be heard. And when that happens, your system no longer has to scream through the pain. It can finally begin to self-organize, not because it was forced, but because it was given the space to remember how. This is how most of us are living in this loud, loud world. The pain we feel, physical, emotional, relational, mental, spiritual, isn't necessarily resistance, though it can be. It might just be a distorted signal trying to be heard through the layers of noise. That's why we can feel the pain of the world now more than ever. The signal is trying to be heard, but we're making so much noise, adding to the pressure and tension, so the signal just gets buried deeper. Noise might be the internalized pressure of self-reliance, tension, or overworking, overconsumption of content, information, food, or substances, energetic overstimulation, trauma adaptations caught in a loop, cultural velocity, or fixing without listening, bypassing without presencing. Hearing the signal doesn't come from doing more. It comes from removing the interference so the original intelligence can restore itself. The signal is the original intelligence. The noise is everything else. So, how do you discern the signal from the noise? It's about using your breath, not your beliefs. It's not something you hear exactly as words or think. It's more like you feel it, you know it, you remember it. The most resonant signal will not usually feel stimulating. It will feel inevitable. Noise wants to be followed, but signal doesn't reach like that. It waits for you to recognize that you already remember it. You don't think it's true. You don't agree logically with it. You remember it. Signal isn't what excites you, it's what brings you back to yourself. And in the swell of voices, opinions, urgencies, invitations, many people are finding themselves overwhelmed, not just because there's too much information, though that is overwhelming, but it's mainly because very little of it is encoded with actual signal. The signal doesn't get louder to compete with the noise. It gets clearer, even when it speaks softly. 25 years ago when I was teaching high school, I took a course on dealing with difficult students. Kids can get rowdy and loud sometimes in the classroom, and teachers often make the mistake of the knee-jerk reaction, shouting over them, "Quiet, shut up." But that's ineffective. And it makes the teacher appear not to be in control because when you yell, you're revealing that you're out of control. So what do? You start talking about something really important in a softer voice. And suddenly, some diligent kids start straining to hear what you're saying. And that's contagious. They might even apply some peer pressure to encourage their classmates to quiet down. And for the kids who keep goofing off, they eventually realize that there are consequences because they missed something important. When things get louder, the tendency is to push harder to compete with the noise. But that's not the signal. Maybe you're feeling like you're trying to hear the signal through all the noise, internally and externally. So slow down, create some space, and use the breath to feel more deeply. Not what other people are telling you, not what you think you have to do, not trying to figure it all out, but just allowing it to emerge. It's there, quietly waiting for you to remember. I want to invite you to tune into the signal, and I hope that this helps. I'm sending you a big hug.